Staying truly informed in today's business climate, well, it feels like an Olympic sport sometimes, doesn't it?
It really does.
You're just constantly bombarded with information data, reports, analyses, and trying to distill it all into smart decisions. It can be completely overwhelming.
It's a huge challenge. And that's really where taking a focused look, doing a proper deep dive into specific insights becomes so valuable.
Right, yeah.
Instead of just, skimming the surface, we're going to really get into some expert knowledge to help you cut through all that noise and figure out what actually matters.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we've got a great piece here from Cognitive Market Research. We're focusing on something absolutely essential, market research.
Foundational stuff.
Yeah, specifically, we want to unpack some common mistakes people make and, more importantly, how you can avoid them.
And the article does a really solid job laying out some of those fundamental pitfalls. We're talking about things like not having clear objectives from the start,
Right.
issues with sample sizes too big, too small, letting biases creep in,
So,
people completely neglecting what your competition is doing, not really targeting the right audience, and using data that's just plain old.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward then. We want to equip you with the practical understanding to either do good market research or at least be able to critically assess the research you come across.
Yeah, help you steer clear of those costly errors.
Make sure your resources actually lead to better business outcomes, not just get wasted. Okay, let's unpack this. The article kicks off with something that seems obvious but apparently isn't always. Unclear research objectives.
Oh, it's so fundamental. I mean, if you don't really know the core question you're trying to answer, how can you possibly expect to get a useful result? It sounds simple, but
It gets missed.
it does. The article gives a really clear example.
Okay.
Say a company gathers tons of data on what consumers generally like, but they haven't identified which specific aspects are actually relevant for their marketing strategy or maybe new product ideas.
So you end up with this mountain of information, but it's like searching for a needle in a haystack.
Exactly. Unclear goals mean wasted effort, basically. You really need to define tight, measurable objectives before you even start. That's how you get insights that actually drive action.
And it sounds like this lack of clarity, it doesn't just affect the end result, it ripples through the whole process.
Absolutely. If your objectives are vague, well, how do you figure out the right number of people to survey?
Right.
Or which methods are best? Interviews, surveys, focus groups. You could easily waste time and money on studies that don't actually hit the mark.
And I guess it makes it harder to sell the results internally, too.
That's another key point the research makes. If the goals weren't clear up front, it's, much harder to get buy-in from your team or other stakeholders. The findings just don't seem as credible.
Makes perfect sense. If you can't clearly say, this is what we wanted to find out and this is what we found, then, yeah, it's tough to argue it's truly meaningful. So, takeaway number one, nail down those objectives. Make them specific. Make them measurable. Get insights you can actually use. Okay, next up, the article talks about the significance of sample size. This always feels a bit technical. Why is getting it just right so critical?
Well, think about it like this. You're trying to understand a big group of people, right? Your whole market, maybe.
Uh-huh.
You obviously can't ask every single person, so you take a sample. Now, if that sample's too small, it's like asking just, 5 people in a giant stadium what they think.
Their opinions might not represent the whole crowd at all.
Exactly. That's what the research means by high variability and unreliable insights. Your findings could be way off, and that can lead you down completely wrong strategic paths, potentially very costly mistakes.
Okay, I get that. Too small, and the data's shaky. But what about the other way around? Why not just survey everyone you possibly can? Wouldn't more data always be better?
You'd think so, but not necessarily. The article highlights that going overboard with your sample size creates its own set of problems.
Like what?
It gets unnecessarily complicated, for one, and expensive.
yeah.
Think about the logistics, the time.
Yeah.
Plus, you often hit a point of diminishing returns. You're adding more people, but you're not really getting significantly more insight or different information.
Ah, so the extra effort doesn't pay off in terms of learning.
Right. And just managing and analyzing massive amounts of data can become a real headache, too.
So it's finding that sweet spot. Big enough to be representative, but not so big. It becomes unwieldy and drains the budget.
That's the goal.
And the research mentions the right sample size helps reduce bias. How does that work?
Yeah, so a well-calculated sample size, and this usually involves thinking about your desired confidence level, like how sure you need to be, and your margin of error, how much inaccuracy you can tolerate, helps ensure your findings are a genuine reflection of the larger group. It minimizes the chance that your results are just skewed because you happen to talk to an unusual subset of people.
Got it. Enough data points to see the real patterns, not just random noise or outliers.
Hmm.
Okay, moving on. Bias in data acquisition. I think we can all, you know, understand how our own perspectives might accidentally influence things. How do researchers actively prevent this?
This is absolutely vital for getting results you can trust. The article really emphasizes crafting survey questions that are neutral,
Meaning?
meaning clearly worded, not leading the witness, so to speak. You want to avoid phrasing that sort of nudges people towards a certain answer or using emotionally loaded language.
Right. So instead of asking, don't you agree our amazing new feature is the best, you'd ask something more like, how satisfied are you with this new feature?
Exactly, much more objective. And the research brings up a really smart tactic, pre-testing your questionnaires.
Like a trial run.
Yeah, basically, get feedback on your questions before you send the survey out wide. It helps you catch potentially biased phrasing or questions that are just confusing and fix them beforehand.
That makes a lot of sense. Do it small before you do it big.
Yeah.
And it sounds like maybe just using one type of data collection could also be a source of bias.
That's another great point. If you only use surveys, for instance, you might miss the richer context, the why behind the numbers that you might get from, say, in-depth interviews or focus groups.
Ah, okay.
So the article advocates for what's called a mixed method approach, combining quantitative data, the numbers from surveys, with qualitative insights, the stories and experiences from interviews. It lets you cross-check findings, get a more complete picture.
Looking at the problem from different angles to make sure you're seeing it clearly. The article also mentions the researchers themselves needing to be aware of their own biases. That sounds tricky.
It is, but it's so important. Things like training on recognizing different types of bias, confirmation bias, for example, can help. And also having a diverse research team.
How does diversity help there?
Well, different people bring different perspectives, different life experiences. They might spot potential blind spots or assumptions that someone else might miss.
Okay, strengthen different viewpoints.
Exactly. And finally, the source reminds us about using random sampling techniques whenever possible. This means everyone in your target group has an equal chance of being picked for the study. It's fundamental for minimizing selection bias, making sure your sample truly represents the whole group.
Okay, so careful question design, mixing methods, researcher self-awareness, diverse teams, random sampling. Quite a toolkit for fighting bias. Now, let's shift gears a bit. Competitive analysis. I feel like this might get pushed aside sometimes in the daily rush. Why is it so essential?
Because, simply put, you don't operate in a bubble. Your competitors' actions, their strategies, their successes, their failures, they all directly impact your business.
Right.
The article makes it clear. Analyzing your competitors helps you understand the whole market dynamic, spot industry trends as they emerge, and realistically assess your own position within that landscape.
It's like knowing the other players on the field and what plays they're running.
Precisely. And understanding their strengths and weaknesses, that can give you a serious edge.
Huh.
Well, the research points out that by looking closely at what competitors are doing, their products, their pricing, their marketing campaigns, you can identify your own unique selling points, but also, crucially, areas where you might be vulnerable.
Okay.
And it gives a great practical example. Maybe you learn from a competitor's really successful ad campaign, or you see a product feature they launched that's really resonating. It's not about just copying,
No, of course not.
but about using their actions as a benchmark for your own innovation, or maybe for adapting your strategy.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Stay informed, stay adaptable.
Mm.
The article also mentions that this kind of analysis helps you anticipate changes, shifts in customer tastes, or the market overall. How does that work?
By keeping a regular eye on your competitors, you often see the early warning signs of broader market shifts. Are they launching new types of products targeting a need you hadn't seen? Are they changing their messaging to appeal to a different demographic? Tracking these moves gives you valuable lead time to adjust your own strategy before you get left behind.
It's like an early detection system for market changes. Definitely sounds crucial. Okay, next up. Making sure you're talking to the right people in your research. Addressing the target audience seems obvious, but how do you really make sure you're doing that effectively?
The article lays out a few key strategies here. First, it really emphasizes creating detailed consumer personas.
Okay, what does that involve?
These are essentially semi-fictional representations of your ideal customers, but they're based on real data demographics, yes, but also psychographics.
Psychographics, yeah.
Yeah, things like their values, their attitudes, their lifestyle, their motivations, and also their behaviors, like how they shop or use products. By really understanding who you're trying to reach on that deeper level, you can tailor your research much more effectively.
So it's way beyond just men aged 30, 50. It's painting a much richer picture of who they are, what makes them tick.
Exactly. And once you have these personas, the article highlights market segmentation.
Breaking down the market.
Right. Dividing your overall target market into smaller, more manageable groups based on shared characteristics, age, income, location, maybe their buying habits, whatever makes sense for your business. This lets you do much more precise research for each specific segment.
So you wouldn't necessarily ask the same questions or use the same approach for, say, budget-conscious students versus high-income professionals, even if they both buy your product category.
Probably not. No, you tailor it. And then there's the practical side, actually recruiting people. How do you ensure the participants are the right fit?
Yeah, how do you filter?
Screening questions are absolutely essential here. You build specific questions into the recruitment process, maybe at the start of an online survey or during a phone call, to weed out anyone who doesn't meet your criteria.
Makes sense. Qualify them up front.
And the research also mentions using tools like social media or digital marketing platforms. You can use their targeting capabilities to reach very specific audience segments based on their online behavior, interest, demographics.
So using the precision of digital advertising for research recruitment, that's clever. Okay, final hurdle the article covers: the impact of outdated research data. In this fast-paced world, I can definitely see how information gets stale fast. What are the dangers here?
Oh, the article is very clear on this. Relying on old data can seriously undermine your business decisions. It can lead to some really harmful long-term consequences.
Because things just change so quickly now.
Exactly. Consumer preferences, market trends, who your competitors even are, it's all constantly evolving. Data from even just a year or two ago might paint a completely misleading picture of today's reality.
Right. What was hot then might be totally irrelevant now. The article mentioned specific risks.
Yeah, things like your products suddenly losing appeal because they don't meet current needs anymore, or maybe entirely new competitors pop up that your old research didn't even account for. Decisions based on that old info can lead you to miss huge opportunities, or conversely, keep investing in things that just aren't important to customers now.
And I imagine it messes up your understanding of your target audience too. Leads to, like, ineffective marketing.
Precisely. If your marketing campaigns are built on outdated assumptions about who your customers are, what they care about, what messages resonate, you're likely wasting money on irrelevant campaigns and positioning your products in ways that just don't connect. It damages your brand, hurts sales. And crucially, the source points out how relying on old data can just stifle innovation. If you're not seeing the emerging trends, the new technologies people are adopting, you get left behind. You become vulnerable.
It really is like trying to navigate using an old map. You're just bound to get lost. The article even throws in a fast fact about the whole Coca-Cola New Coke saga. How does that fit in here?
Ah, yes, the classic New Coke story. This is a fascinating cautionary tale. So back in the 70s, early 80s, Coke was seeing sales slip a bit against Pepsi.
Like a Pepsi Challenge era.
Exactly. So they thought, okay, maybe the core issue is taste. They developed a new formula, new Coke, and guess what? In blind taste tests conducted at that time, it actually beat both original Coke and Pepsi.
So the research looked positive.
On the surface, yes. Based purely on that current taste data, market research predicted it would be a success. But then they launched it, pulled the original formula off the shelves, and, well, massive public backlash. Disaster.
So what did the research miss?
It completely overlooked the deep emotional connection people had with the original Coke brand, the history, the nostalgia. The taste tests were fine in isolation, but they didn't account for the context, the brand loyalty, the feeling of having something familiar taken away.
They didn't research the feeling around the brand, just the taste.
Pretty much. They failed to properly frame the research to understand that consumers wouldn't just be tasting something new, they'd be losing something old that they felt attached to. So even positive current data, like taste preference, led them astray because they missed that crucial emotional context.
Wow. That new Coke example is powerful. It really shows that even if your data seems good and up to date on one level, if you miss the bigger picture, the context, the emotion, you can still make huge mistakes. Okay, so we have really dug deep into these common market research mistakes today. Let's try and bring it all together.
We've definitely covered a lot of ground, started with the absolute foundation, having clear research objectives.
Right. Know what you're looking for.
Then the importance of getting that sample size right. Not too small, not too big for credible results. And we talked about all the ways bias can sneak in and why you need active strategies, neutral questions, mixed methods, self-awareness, random sampling to prevent it.
Essential for trustworthy data.
Then we hit competitive analysis.
Yeah.
You just can't ignore the competition.
Oh.
And making sure you're actually talking to the right target audience using things like personas and segmentation.
Yeah, getting those relevant insights.
And finally, the huge danger of relying on outdated information in today's fast-moving market, remembering that even current data needs context, like the new Coke story showed us.
Absolutely. So, our mission, as we said, was to arm you with the knowledge to sidestep these common pitfalls, hopefully helping you conduct better research or at least be a smarter consumer of it, leading to better decisions and less wasted effort.
That's the goal.
So here's maybe a final thought for you to chew on. As you think about your own work, your own industry, which of these potential traps, unclear goals, sample issues, bias, ignoring competitors, wrong audience, old data, which one do you think might be the most relevant or maybe the easiest one to accidentally overlook in your context?
Yeah, it's worth reflecting on where might your blind spots be when it comes to gathering and using information. How could you maybe immediately apply some of these ideas to sharpen up your strategic thinking?
Absolutely. Because ultimately, well-conducted research that's grounded in clear goals, uses sound methods, and relies on current relevant information. It's just an incredibly powerful tool.
Definitely.
It helps you navigate all the complexity out there and really fuels that continuous learning and growth that every business needs.